All right, let's just jump right in. Picture this. You are the most powerful person on the planet, and your first day on the job, it starts with the absolute worst news imaginable. The stakes, they're not just high, they are literally existential. This is the exact scenario that keeps world leaders and military planners up at night. This isn't some Hollywood movie plot. It's a very real-world protocol. You have less time to decide the fate of millions than it takes to order a pizza. Heck, less time than it takes to get through this explainer. And this timeline, wow, it just shows you how incredibly compressed that decision really is. At minute 0, satellites spot the launch. By minute 4, you're already in a briefing. But here's the crucial part. The launch sequence for your own missiles, that takes 5 minutes. So you have to decide by minute 9. If you wait any longer, you lose the ability to retaliate from your silos. By minute 14, it's game over. The psychological pressure crammed into that tiny 5-minute window, it's almost impossible to comprehend. And on top of all that, just look at the uncertainty you're dealing with. That initial report, it's a total blizzard of incomplete information. You know missiles are on their way, you've got a good idea of the targets, but you definitely don't know everything. Did they hold some of their arsenal in reserve? And if they did, why? This is what they call the fog of war, where a decision that could end civilization has to be made with partial data and a clock that's just screaming in your ear. So can't you just shoot them down? Well, not really. Your anti-ballistic missiles, your only real line of defense, have a success rate that's basically a coin flip, and that's under perfect test conditions. But this is anything but perfect. The enemy has launched hundreds of decoys, maybe even detonated warheads way up in the atmosphere just to blind your radar. The cold hard reality is, most of those bombs are getting through. So, how in the world does a nightmare like this even start? It probably wouldn't begin with a direct face-off between superpowers. It's much more likely to spark from a regional flashpoint that just spirals completely out of control. So let's take a look at one of the world's most volatile regions to see exactly how that can happen. The conflict between Israel and Iran is really fueled by two deeply held and totally opposing worldviews. From Israel's perspective, a nuclear-armed Iran isn't just a threat, it's an existential danger, and they point to decades of hostile rhetoric to back that up. But from Iran's point of view, its nuclear program and its regional allies, well, they see those as absolutely essential for their own security and influence. The scary part is, both sides truly believe they're just acting in self-preservation. And this isn't some new crisis that just popped up overnight. It's actually the result of years and years of failed diplomacy. Remember the 2015 nuclear deal? It was literally designed to prevent this exact scenario. But when the US pulled out in 2018, the whole thing fell apart. All the attempts since then to revive it have gone nowhere, and that left this really dangerous vacuum where the drums of war just got louder and louder. And the consequences, they're immediate, and they're global. A regional war where Iran can blockade the Strait of Hormuz, and a huge percentage of the world's oil flows through there, that sends a massive shockwave through the entire world economy. You can see it right here. Oil prices shoot through the roof, gas prices jump, and the markets just tank. This isn't some distant war fought somewhere else. This is a crisis that hits home for families everywhere, making it harder to put food on the table and gas in the car. But a nation's military power isn't just about its economy, right? It's about its arsenal and the doctrine behind it. So let's compare two key nuclear-capable states, Pakistan and Israel. We're going to see how their totally different strategies, basically manpower versus technology, define their power. Okay, so the core difference is in how their armies are structured. Pakistan projects its power through sheer numbers. We're talking about a massive, professional, standing military that can sustain really long campaigns. Israel, on the other hand, is kind of like a coiled spring. It has a smaller active force, but because of its mandatory service, it can call up this huge, well-trained reserve force almost overnight. It's built for quick, decisive wars. And this chart really puts that into perspective. When you look at the number of active day-to-day military personnel, Pakistan has a clear and pretty significant advantage. That numerical superiority is a huge part of its military strategy. But, modern warfare isn't just a numbers game. Israel counters its disadvantage in manpower with a huge technological edge. We're talking about advanced stealth fighters like the F-35 that can just slip past enemy radar, precision strikes that can take out an enemy's command structure, and this incredible network of satellites that gives them a god's eye view of the battlefield. It's a classic strategy of quality over quantity. And then you have the ultimate trump card. While Pakistan is an officially declared nuclear state, Israel has this policy called nuclear ambiguity. By never confirming or denying that it has nuclear weapons, it creates this incredibly powerful deterrent. Any potential enemy has to assume the worst-case scenario. And that just fundamentally changes their entire strategic calculus, all without Israel ever having to make a single threat. So, we've looked at the timeline, the politics, the military strategies, but what happens when deterrence fails? Let's stop talking about the abstract and get into the horrifying reality of what a nuclear strike actually looks like. This is a simulation of a small, 15-kiloton bomb, about the size of the one dropped on Hiroshima, hitting a major city. Within a 1-kilometer radius, everything is just gone, vaporized. Go out to 3 kilometers and the mortality rate is 75%. And imagine this. You're 8 kilometers away, thinking you might be safe, and then the shockwave hits, shattering every window and turning all that glass into a million tiny daggers. Now, when you scale that up to a full strategic exchange with hundreds of warheads, the numbers become almost impossible to wrap your head around. The initial blasts would kill millions instantly. But when you factor in radiation sickness and the total collapse of society, the death toll by the end of just the first month is projected to be in the tens of millions. And believe it or not, it doesn't even stop there. All the soot and dust kicked up into the atmosphere from all those burning cities could actually block out the sun, triggering what's called a nuclear winter. This would cause a global famine, a slow, agonizing death for billions of people who are nowhere near the initial conflict. And that's the key. This could happen even if your country wasn't involved in the war at all. Okay, the threat is terrifyingly real. There's no doubt about it. But it's also really important to remember that for over 75 years, humanity has somehow managed to pull back from the brink. So let's take a look at how we've survived this long. And these are just a few of the times the world basically held its breath. In 1983, a Soviet officer had to trust his gut instinct over his own computers, which were screaming at him that the US had launched an attack. Turns out, it was just sunlight reflecting off some clouds. Then in 1995, a simple scientific rocket almost triggered a full Russian retaliatory strike. We've been saved by cool heads and honestly by a good bit of sheer luck. And this story just perfectly illustrates that human element. Deep under the ocean, completely out of contact with Moscow, 2 officers on a Soviet sub were convinced war had started and they wanted to launch a nuclear torpedo. But a 3rd officer, Vasily Arkhipov, said no. His single decision right then and there likely prevented World War III. It just goes to show you that despite all the technology, human choice is still the most important factor. And you know what? There has been real progress. Over decades of really difficult arms reduction treaties, the global nuclear arsenal has been drastically cut down from its terrifying Cold War peak. This shows that moving toward a safer world isn't just a fantasy. It's something we've actually done before, and successfully. But the journey is definitely far from over. New tensions, new kinds of weapon systems, they complicate the picture. But the lesson from our past is crystal clear. Progress towards a world without these weapons isn't guaranteed, but it's also not impossible. And that really leaves us with the ultimate question. We've built all these complex systems to prevent this nightmare, but we know those systems can fail. We rely on the good judgment of individuals, but we also know that humans make mistakes. So if the risk of using these weapons, even once, is a catastrophe for literally everyone on Earth, is the only winning move to just not play the game at all?